Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Sarrah Christensen, and I will be talking about when Jupiter kisses your sun. I just wanted to first introduce myself and talk about how I was inspired to do this particular topic. Earlier this summer, I was reading the Mountain Astrologer, and there was an article done by Kathy Rose, and it was called Jupiter Conjunct the Sun, the Self-Expansion Transit. And it got my juices going for, getting excited about the Jupiter and that it was switching signs. Today it entered Sagittarius. And so it kind of got me interested in exploring that theme. And based on kind of how she wrote the article, I won't give away all the spoils of the article for your own enjoyment, but it kind of made me think about that in my life. And that would be a fun topic to explore. So here we go. There we are. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Do you see the split screen or do you see the whole screen?
I see a split screen.
Okay, how do I get rid of that?
Okay, if you, hang on, I'll just pause the recording here.
Sorry. Okay, so here we go. So it kind of made me wonder about, is Jupiter lucky? Is it fortunate? Because I wondered about the tone, and oftentimes we hear about that in astrology. And it kind of made me wonder about it. One of the quotes that was in the article Kathy Rose had written was, Jupiter offers supportive enthusiasm that helps us to face doubt or fear that may hold us back from adventure of a new experience. And I thought that was an interesting thing to consider. As we get into our example from our volunteer later, we'll explore that and see what we come up with at the end of that. So Jupiter in its cycle, it's roughly a 12-year cycle, but it's always the journey of expansion within the limits of Saturn. And that growth comes also with squares and oppositions to other planets in our chart. So there's the squares and oppositions are designed to make us or help us make necessary course corrections by providing pressure that motivates and encourages us to take action. That's also by Kathy. And I really like that. I kind of consider it as the tension for growth. And so I thought that was a good consideration as well as a part of the Jupiter and its cycle. Stephen Arroyo wrote a book about Jupiter, and in each of the headings of the elements, fire, water, earth, water, or air and water, he had a little notation on each of them, and I wanted to bring that in here because I want to kind of fold that into the mix here about when Jupiter is conjunct the sun. Our natal Jupiter, whatever element it is in, will have that tonality to it. So I'm just going to go through them very quickly, even though we only have one example, which is water. But wanted to share this for others who are interested in exploring their Jupiter conjunct sun in their life experience. So Jupiter in the fire signs is about inner faith that comes when one is outgoing, enthusiastic, assertive, and physically active. Opportunities are stimulated when one takes express oneself and try new things. So that's for the fire signs. I put the book there in the italicized detail. Under the earth signs, he says, in Jupiter and earth signs, inner faith comes when one tunes into practicality, dependability, and the experiences of the senses. Opportunities are stimulated when one works hard, assumes responsibilities, and tunes into nature and its rhythm. And in the air, Jupiter and air signs, inner faith is stimulated through exploring new ideas, communicating with new people, and social improvement. Opportunities come when one expresses ideas enthusiastically and interacts with others for a future goal. And our example is going to be in water, so we'll look and see how relative this is in the example. Jupiter in water signs, inner faith is stimulated through depth of emotional experience and through positive expression of one's compassion and imagination. Opportunities come when one is sensitive and caring toward others, and one intuitively follows one's inner yearnings. Okay, so as a part of this exercise, and if you wanted to do this on your own, I highly encourage it. I think we learn a lot through the exploration of ourselves and our lives through the cycles of our own astrology. So this is just a reminder that tracking our life experiences by keeping a written journal is really important and valuable. And I have definitely used my journals more than once in my astrology inner work that I've done. And it really helps when we're kind of remembering events. So we're going to jump into our example. So here's Julia's chart. And I sat with Julia and kind of went through her life over, 4 or 5 decades to kind of get into this information. What I want to point out for Julia's chart is that when Julia was born, she had Jupiter in Pisces, in early Pisces, and we see in her chart it is in her 2nd house, and it's conjunct Chiron and opposite the Uranus in Virgo, up there. So, and I would probably also want to include Pluto. I would loop in here Ceres, but we're going to just target Pluto here as being widely conjunct or widely opposite her Jupiter. Her Sagittarius sun is also square to that Virgo, to that Pluto. And also Ceres is also. And so when we look at when Jupiter comes all the way around her chart and comes to conjunct her sun, her experiences are going to be around those archetypes coming into play related to those Jupiter and Chiron together, Jupiter square her sun, Jupiter opposite Uranus, and also Pluto. So also Jupiter rules the Sagittarius of her 12th house and her 1st house of self and identity. And then the sun, which will be stimulated from the Jupiter conjunction that we're going to be talking about, is about her 8th house. So ruler of her 8th and her Mars. So all of these will come into play here, okay? So her 12th, 1st, and 3rd houses, 3rd also for the Pisces piece, because Jupiter is a co-ruler of Pisces, and Neptune also ruler of Pisces. So the themes of community, her self-worth of the Jupiter itself being activated by itself in transit, and these other ones that I just mentioned are all going to be coming online. I would also suspect that because the sun has Mercury so close to it that when Jupiter comes up to it, it would be significant that anything Mercury related would also be part of that, what's stimulated and activated. So 7th house, 6th house themes, and also 9th house themes, okay? With some of the overlay into the 8th house. So it touches a lot. So this was an interesting example to explore. We also noticed that Mars and Leo will be activated as well because the sun with the Jupiter activating it. So these are the areas of life that Jupiter expands when it touches the sun. And the Sagittarius will be where we see her essence, her light, her solar energy being enhanced or exaggerated in some sense, and the moments that, when that comes online. And it's 12th house as well, so we don't want to miss out on that. So her sun lights up that 12th house, and we'll likely see Julia's presence with others in relationships, work, and her own projection into the world, and how She will bring some revelation, truth, and be mixed with her own values, the second house, Jupiter. Wounds are connected to her values in some way as a part of her evolutionary journey, or her self-confidence, integrity, and her community, third house, right? Second and third house. Also note how important her sun is. So when the Jupiter comes to her sun is the ruler of her north node. Now, I'm not going to go into her whole karmic evolutionary nodal story here that we see in the south node and the north node, but I want to point that out, that over time we will see how that north node starts to come into stronger awareness for Julia. So do note that when Jupiter moves to conjunct her sun, it will naturally be square to her own Jupiter. And so that natal placement, that is an important piece of the understanding is, of this big cosmic Jupiterian kiss. So when Jupiter transits to conjunct her sun, what do you think she might experience? It's a great question you could ask yourself. What would be that if I were to look at my own, what would it look like? And you might want to ask that question as you start the process. So here we go. We're going to go into the first transit. So when Jupiter came around the zodiac through her life, that in 1971, Jupiter entered Sagittarius on September 12th. And then it came to a conjunction with her sun around November 6th or 7th, depending on where you're in the world. So in orb, basically most of November of 1971. At this time, she was about 9 years old. Julia shared that she went for the summer, just a few months before this, in 71 to her grandparents for a visit in Montreal. She drove across country with a family that was a bit foreign to her. She said that they felt like foreigners to her. Julia noted that this summer was a blessed summer away from home with her grandparents. She learned about affection on this visit when her grandmother asked for a good night kiss as she put her to bed. And that kind of affection was foreign to Julia before this summer. It was an eye-opening time for Julia, and she felt loved. This was also a time when her parents were considering divorce, though ultimately they did not divorce. Julia had voiced her desire about it, but was not listened to, of course. She notes her mother had her own issues and refused to do it. When we see this transit of Jupiter highlighting her unconscious around awareness of affection and self-worth, second house, coming into her awareness with the contrast between her mom and dad and her grandmother and grandfather. It is also highlighted in the woundedness in her of what she was missing with her own parents. So we can kind of see that coming online here. And some astrologers put the grandparents, because they're extensions of the family, in the third house. Okay, that's the first transit. The second transit of Jupiter to her natal sun happened in 1983. In December 1982, Jupiter entered Sagittarius, again a day after Christmas. And Jupiter exacts to her natal sun around March 3rd in 1983. This is a key year for Julia, as Jupiter will station retrograde on March 27th, 54 minutes of her sun exactly. It would have been within orb in late February of 1983. It then moved by retrograde again to conjunct her sun for a second hit on April 22nd of 1983, and then stationed direct on July 29th, 1983. As it moved forward again, it was within orb in October of 1983 and exact on October 19th, finally waning from that conjunction through November of 1983. So you can see it really spans several months in 1983. In this year, Julia went through dynamic inner and outer life shifts. Julia started dating and began a relationship with a young man in the summer of 1982, while still living at home, almost 20 years old. This turned into a significant relationship for her, and they talked of marriage. She knew him at age 12, note the Jupiter cycle there, when they met. But they met again in Calgary when she was age 15. They became engaged that summer before the Jupiter to Sun would be exact in March 1983. She learned of his dishonesty that fall of 1982, and then she broke up with him. She felt betrayed by his dishonesty. She decided to enroll in the university around sciences, which she was in for that fall of 1982 at the beginning. The boyfriend, fiance, did not support this path for her, and she felt distracted by him. She also realized in retrospect that she was not disciplined and did not see this through, and ended up falling out of her commitment to her higher education. Very much a Sagittarian theme. Also ninth house here. She felt in sharing this part of her life story, she'd blown the opportunity for her higher education in university for what she chose at the time with her boyfriend, fiance. She then decided to go to work for a dental office in late fall, winter of 1983. So we're kind of at the back end of that when that movement of Jupiter over her sun. She took the job as a receptionist for the front office there. She was very good at her job. However, she would come to issues around others' integrity in the workplace while working at this place. A dental assistant had moved from that role in the back into a front office type manager role without the skills that Julia had. She felt it was unfair and that underneath it was unethical behavior, intuitively sensing an affair between the dental assistant and the dentist as a possibility. The job did not work out and mutually agreed to move on. She felt wounded around the goodness of people and her value of self-worth and integrity being highlighted for her in this experience of 1983 and carrying into 84. She left home and she joined the military, influenced from her father, who's a Capricorn, and waited to join in the fall of 1984. So this is kind of the fallout from that kind of Jupiter to the Sun experience of 83 and into 84. So she waited to the timing to when she would join so she could get an assignment she wanted as an administrator in the military. He had shared that her father had shared that there wouldn't be discrepancy of pay, rank, order in the military. After what she'd experienced at the dental office, it was a choice she made for her career. Notice the themes here in this very significant year in 1983 and going into 84, which then influences the decision around the military career. We have a theme around the relationships, around integrity, dishonesty, or Sagittarian, and an unexpected outcome. Notice the natal Jupiter opposite Uranus being stimulated there. We have the theme of higher education, also ninth house and Sagittarian nature, free will choices. Themes around ethics, integrity, self-worth, wounding, the worth of someone tied to their income, dishonesty at the workplace with the coworkers and the manager. She mentioned it as a blinding light shining on dishonesty in this case. The second house is being highlighted a lot here. Then also new career direction and behind the scenes in the military. I see the first house in the, the 12th house is a part of this, behind the scenes, the sun in the 12th. And the theme of freedom of self being restricted. Once you join the military, there's a lot of freedom that's being restricted. That is also an interesting 12th house Sagittarian theme. And the military commitment theme, also of discretion of pay and ranking of skills, second house kind of themes at the dental office. So that was a very important for Julia. That year was very, very significant. A lot of things happening as she's evolving. Now we come to the third transit of Jupiter to the natal sun. And Jupiter entered Sagittarius on December 9th, 1994. It was in orb all the way through mid-late January, from mid-late January through mid-February 1995. So I should also point out that Jupiter went retrograde around April 2nd of 1995, around 15 degrees, and then it went back up through August 2nd of 95 to 5 degrees, 32 minutes of Sagittarius. So it was exact to her sun on June 6th of 95 in the retrograde. And then it went direct again on September 28th, 29th of 95. Excuse me. So in Julia's experience in 1994, she shares that in December of 94, her husband, she married in 1987, just a little side note there, and their 3 kids moved to Winnipeg for her new opportunity with Air Command, 1 Air Movement Squadron. She received an increase in responsibility and an increase for her income. She was promoted to chief clerk, and that role and that compensation started in January of 95. She was there until 1997. In this time in 1995, she met a very significant person as well as other people. It was a time in the following year, 1996, that this person that she met in 95 would be a lesson for her own integrity. She became involved in an extramarital affair from that person she met in 95, in 1996. This required her to take a hard look at herself and her integrity that mattered to her. She said this was a time of deep introspect into her inner self, her needs, her relationship with her husband, and more. It eventually would be a catalyst into relationship counseling a few years later. She notes here in our sharing that her husband's sun is 0 degree Leo, right on her North Node in her 7th house, and that she knows he is very important in her life overall. She shared he had difficulties too around values, attention, family entanglements, highlighting 2nd house values too. This highlights Julia's 2nd house Jupiter position. She notes it was a failure in her discernment and choices. The marriage continued. They stayed together and she had to rebuild trust. Noting her husband has been good after that obstacle in their relationship. It did require hard work and counseling a few years later. In 1997, just a couple years later, she did have a peacekeeping in Egypt and another attempt at the university path for her higher education. So it kind of spilled over into those years. And Julia also notes that 2003 was a huge year for generated growth. So that period was pretty significant for her own understanding her and maybe getting to her own wounds around Jupiter. Then we come to the 4th transit of Jupiter to her natal sun. Jupiter entered Sagittarius on November 24, 2006, in orb through late December, January, February of 2007. The first hit is exact to Julia's sun on January 11th of 2007, goes retrograde at the 10 degree mark, 46 minutes on April 6th, 2007, so you can see how close it is to her sun. And it goes back to on August 7th, 2007, when it stations direct. So she had a second hit on July 30th of 2007, and the third hit was direct again when, like I said, on the 15th of August. So it was pretty much an orb from July through September. So Julia's experience in 2006, she was working as an artist, and in 2007, in that summer, she was the artist at the Kelowna Okanagan in January 2007. I hope I said that right. When she took on a project to create regional awards with policy making, ethics, rules, and they had incorporated in 2005, but this was the Community Art Awards with the highest of ethics that she was creating. So you can see that kind of the themes of the ethics, the truths coming from the Sagittarius, but also from the Pisces. and kind of now is stimulating her 10th house as part of the career as well. She worked a lot behind the scenes, not liking to be out front. That's her sun in the 12th. She had 2 girlfriends that they created this together and launched an erotic art show, the first of its kind in the Okanagan area. The first show was in 2008. She says it was a small community where boobs and bums and art were offensive in a conservative place. And I thought that was very interesting. She mentioned that she did a life drawing society and worked an entire year in charcoal, no paint, and in ink from 2006 and 2007. So throughout that time, the community gave her flack for being in the limelight for this endeavor. During that time, she kept a running track of when the incidents happened for news articles, TV, and radio interviews in her CV of the dates. More an irritation than actually being mad is a better description of her feelings about it, but she says she was more confused as to why people would react that way. We should also note that her art career was taking off in 2003, so moving into the art where she's not only creating but participating to create the awards with high ethics is kind of where it had evolved to. So that was for 4 years prior to the sun conjuncting in 2007. She felt mad as she didn't deserve it, knowing it took a lot of work, hard work behind the scenes to do what she did. On the radio, talking about these art community base. She suspended her own career around 2010 to 2012 to work on the community art projects, which kept going up through January of 2017. She can see the community themes now coming out in her experience as she's highlighting the community of the 3rd house with the Jupiter co-ruling that Pisces. Was also career and the erotic art from the 10th house in that Scorpio. So that's what she's had so far. And in coming up, we have Jupiter, who's just entered Sagittarius today, and then it will be conjunct her sun again on December 24th this year, and pretty much be in orb through 2019. So coming to this point, she kind of wants to go a little bit back and say that in 2016, to bring to where we're at now, so what's likely to unfold in the coming months. In 2016, she was accepted into an Indigenous immersion school to learn their language and culture, Sagittarius. It has a lot to do with her current work now, the work she's doing now, and how it focuses on the power structures, like working with, through, and subverting through what has been, it's been a theme entire life, but it's kind of like the power structures between the whites and the indigenous culture. So we're looking at what's coming up. And she's mentioning that summer of 2019, Julie is finishing her master's degree. So that's higher education, Sagittarius theme. So that sun is really, or the Jupiter coming to the sun is highlighting that. But it's also kind of bringing online that she's creating an exhibition of art for this master's degree as it's coming out on these themes of the suppression and oppression of Native Indigenous people amidst white power structures. Powerful themes right now. So December 24th, it becomes exact, Jupiter to her sun. And it will go retrograde, it will station retrograde in April 10th of 2019 at 24 degrees, and then it will retrace back to 14 degrees of Sagittarius, which is interesting because that will come to her Mercury. Not necessarily come back to her sun, but close enough to be still stimulating it in orb when it stations to go direct on August 11th of 2019. And she mentions in sharing what's going on in her plans for next year that she'll be doing a video portion of her project next year. And that video is to be interviewing people about their perception of her art. that she's done. So it's quite impactful around those themes. So we have kind of the 10th house, but it's like the Sagittarian higher learning, the truth, the Jupiter conjunct the Chiron. So having moved through her own wounds, like when we were talking, she's like, it was like looking back over all of the different times that Jupiter came to her sun and having different experiences, but only in retrospect can look at it from a different kind of perspective. One would be like in 1971, in that period, she was aware of what's possible. The second one was like confronting the demon or a demon. And the third, becoming the demon herself. And then fourth, solving that demon. And then fifth, moving beyond the demon. So it was like this kind of evolutionary growth you can see across the themes that I thought was really beautiful to see in her life experience. She notes that she really felt like a foreign, really felt foreign her entire existence. And it kind of makes me think about her son in the 12th house and trying to navigate relationship. And that every time we discuss these transit dates from the Jupiter coming to the sun, it gave her this broader understanding that she had the right to claim, respect, existence, her self-worth in all its facets, good or bad. So as she moves into the next one, this coming year, I think there's this potential that her art, her own healing her wounds, her engaging with the community around these wounded places in all of us in the collective, kind of the 12th house thing, that her higher education, her art will have really a interesting impact, maybe beyond what we can imagine right in this moment, in her community, and that these themes are all being activated just as we had set up in the beginning of what houses and the archetypes in them, 12th, 1st, 2nd, 8th, and 10th is the primary here. So that's the sharing of this particular example. Do we have any questions? No questions?
I have a question. If Julia, I thought she was gonna say something or ask some questions. Do you see the since the sun is the ruler of that north node, and with Jupiter, the transiting Jupiter conjunct that north node, and also with Jupiter, her natal Jupiter sharing that's one of the rulers, Neptune, by the sun being in the 12th, did that, you kind of feel like that Jupiter transit to the sun really brought out the north node? From the examples you gave, it kind of sounds like it to me.
Yes, we caught on to it, I think, around the time of the third transit where it started to come online more in awareness, I think, because of the husband relationship, because his sun was sitting at 0 degrees. Not that it wasn't present in the other ones. I think we evolve on our north node, and based on her sharing, understanding the importance of her sun came in retrospect through experience. And her, like I said, and the reason I'm sharing is she felt more comfortable with me sharing. So that 12th house sun and 12th house Mercury. So does that answer your question, Wanda?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, her Jupiter with the co-rulership of Pisces being Jupiter and Neptune, every time it hit the sun by conjunction, it's lighting up that T-square between the Jupiter Chiron and that mix in her Virgo, you know, Uranus, but widely even the Ceres and the Pluto, of course, because of the square to the sun, right? So it just activates that every single time. Different configurations of aspects from the natal Jupiter to sun or sun to what else would be different for people, right? So it really got into, but the sun is also important because it's her north node ruler and how it's so important for her evolutionary growth. So because it kind of got into the question for me early on is it always fortunate? Well, it might not be easily seen if you're having a lot of experiences that are T-square in nature around that Jupiter coming to the sun. So it's all relative how you experience that Jupiter kissing your sun. I think over time you can see the fortune of it in the blessing that came over time from the evolutionary curve of it, you know, and discernment of choices. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it definitely does. I like you mentioned, as far as the aspects, I think that probably the blessing or the fortune or the goodness, benevolence of Jupiter is very relative. Probably more so if Pluto is not involved in it in any way. And see, with hers, you know, Pluto is definitely drawn in because it's conjunct Uranus, which is the ruler of her south node. So,
yeah. But I can see now, after seeing her arc through 4 decades, going on 5 decades of experiences, how the Pluto in Virgo is transforming those hidden parts. You know, that's really 8th house powerful Pluto, right? Even though it's, what, 5 degrees from the cusp of the 9th, it's solidly in the 8th, right? So that it's even more transforming that piece. And her service to the collective comes through her, what work she's done. And it then ties in kind of the Jupiter-Neptune combination because of the art and the dark, the shadow material is a better way to language it, of what she has focused on in this master's degree and what she's bringing to the community in a significant form to speak to wounds, right? That Jupiter Chiron. So the blessing is perhaps not, we probably can't even see the fullness of it yet because it's still coming in. And but she had to go through phases of understanding it in different contexts, different viewpoints. Yeah. That's why I think that the benefit from going through your own process of looking at your own experience when the Jupiter hit your own sun by transit and when it conjunct your sun, you know, looking over the years and remembering what was happening in your life and how that over time shifts, you know, different people, different things that you're doing, and shows you your themes of your growth, how you're expanding. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah,
Any other?
Sarah, it's Julia. Hi.
Okay.
Hi. That was really amazing. Thank you. I just wanted to say the information that you provided at the very beginning from the gentleman there, where he talks about the Jupiter in water and emotional experiences and intuitive yearnings for the Jupiter in the water sign. Well, I always understood that, you know, Jupiter is like the planet of expansion. It's Mr. Party Guy. Yeah, let's go get it on. And for me, I never really experienced that. It was always very difficult. Like from all the things that we were talking about, there was never, like afterwards, you know, like when you realize something, like the 2020, like you were saying, that has been where the most value was. But in the midst of it all, it was very, very difficult situations. So hearing you speak about how, you know, like, and I love, this is probably my moon talking, but I love how objective, you know, this whole situation is.
Mhm.
I think it's just filling in those blanks and you know, whatever what we were talking about, like the issues that we were talking about, bringing to light the what happened during those transits and why it was so difficult. Like that was very valuable to hear. But yeah, it's that expansion of awareness, and it's that expansion of personality and expansion of one's self. So that's definitely definitely what happened for sure. The other thing that was interesting that you said is, and it didn't click until like now, but when but when you had said, for I think it was the second one in the 80s, when I put my boyfriend at that time in front of my own goals or desires, then that's when there was sorrow. But you know, it's like one of those, you know, sine cosine type of things where you go up and then you go down and then you go back up and you go down. And anyway, that's it.
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes. Do you think from going through this experience, it gives you an awareness of, you know, like how we look, I guess, as many of us look at Jupiter in astrology when we first start as a beginner, is like, oh, the big benefic, you know, or whatever, the joyful Jupiter optimism and so forth. But your own personal experience is very different, right? So it's almost like a reminder around how individual our charts are for, you know, in understanding that, right?
Well, you know, it's almost like he's a big fat Saturn.
I never heard like that, but okay.
So because that's pretty much the themes that seem to have been coming around. And you know, like the anyway, yeah. So you think that he's all, you know, party guy, but he's really party guy with a very heavy dose of psychotherapy.
Interesting that he's in trine to Scorpio in your chart. Water. Right?
Yeah.
It's all relative. So
Yeah, it's all relative. It's right.
yeah. Nah, I think this is a great experience. I didn't fully go into my own. Now I really want to, because there's the Jupiter to the Sun, but then there's your Jupiter to your Jupiter. You know, your Jupiter return is a very important period of life. We all look at that. You may have similar themes because of how it's tied into that T-square, but I think kind of looking at both side by side, you know, writing it all out would be quite valuable in understanding yourself in a process of self-awareness, right?
Oh, definitely. When we were talking, there were definite themes of, you know, every 3 years, every 6 years, every 9 years. So that was interesting. Just, you know, after we spoke, I kind of just went through, oh, what happened then? What happened then? And yeah, it's very interesting to watch the houses light up as they go through. So he definitely has a lot of impact. Like, that's probably understating it, but that, you know, it's yeah, very interesting to see.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you, Julia. And thank you for being the volunteer. Any other questions or sharings or insights?
Sarah, I've got a question. Did you look at the Just the Saturn Jupiter square, natal square that she has in her chart. Just isolating that.
Jupiter, Saturn?
Uh-huh. I'm Jupiter, Saturn. Jupiter's sun. I'm looking at sun and I'm saying Saturn.
Yes, because that's part of the T that I was talking about. So the Sun, T, widely these two, right? But definitely the Pluto. But because this all kind of gets pushed together because, you know, the Sun is definitely square the Pluto for sure. But the Jupiter is absolutely opposite the Uranus. So they all kind of get blended into a big T. Yeah, absolutely. But I think the significance is it's co-ruling two signs. Then you have to pull in the 10th because of Neptune. But the the Sun square this piece and the Sun square this piece. But Jupiter also rules that Sag, right? It's ruling both her 12th and her first place of identity. So it's kind of an interesting blend. She says in our when we were talking that people think that at first that she's a Jupiterian, like Sagittarian type, but then miss a great portion of who she is because it's here in the 12th. You follow me? Like someone has a face value of, say, the Sagittarian presence, and that's ruled by her Jupiter, but they probably wouldn't always pick up on her 12th house and how that whole thing is configured and getting the deeper part, the introspective part of her. Which is so key in her, how she positions herself in the world. And then also how she languages some of that inner feeling into her art. And then that becomes, you know, the place that she can express that out through the art. Which is pretty great for that North Node in Leo.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's it, Linda. Unless there's anyone else.
Okay, well, that's fine. We can wind down now if you like.
Yeah.
Okay, any final questions? Just giving everyone one more chance.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sarah, and your volunteer, Julia. Looking forward to catching you next time.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Would you all please thank
you.
Sarah
Thank you.
Christensen, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Loved it.
Thanks.